Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist and the author of The Complete Compliance Handbook. Today, I have a real treat for you as I have Christys Grant-Hart on to talk about her new book, How to Have a Wildly Successful Career in Compliance. Christy takes some of the top guidance she's been able to develop over the years and talk to some of the world's literally top compliance practitioners to put together a book about how to have a career in compliance. But I found it to be really more than that, because not only is it a book about how to have a wildly successful career in compliance, it also is a book about how to have a wildly successful compliance program, because many of the tips she writes about and the issues she brings work on multiple levels. I think it's a book that every compliance practitioner should have in their compliance library. We're going to go through what's in the book, why she wrote it, how she wrote it, and why we both think it's one of the most important books to come out, certainly since my book, The Complete Compliance Handbook. If you know Christy at all, you know she is a high-energy, passionate compliance officer and really an advocate for the entire profession. I know you will enjoy this podcast, and I hope you will pick up her book. It goes on sale on Tuesday, June 18th, and we're going to link to the Amazon site in the show notes. The FCPA Compliance Report is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And I would normally say you're in for a real treat today, but actually I'm in for a real treat today together with you, because not only do you have one of my favorite people in the world ever, Christys Grant-Hart, but equally importantly, we're here to talk about her new book, How to Have a Wildly Successful Career in Compliance, which will go on sale on Tuesday, June 19th. So, Christy, thank you for taking the time to visit with me about this great new book.
Thanks so much, Tom. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
So the reason I'm so thrilled about this book is it follows your prior book on how to have a wildly successful career, and but it's really it works on so many different levels, Christy. It works on the personal level. It works for the chief compliance officer level. It works on the compliance practitioner level. And from my perspective, and perhaps most importantly, I found it to work on the compliance program level. So with that, what I wanted to really ask you is, why did you write this book as opposed to perhaps any of the other books you could have written?
Well, sure. So, Tom, the first book I wrote was on persuasion and motivation and how to get to your audience, and the second one was on strategy. And what I get asked more than anything else, I get emails nearly every day with people asking me about how to improve their career or how to start in compliance, what to do next. They maybe want to move into financial services and they're in healthcare, or all those kinds of questions to say, how do I build my career? And both based on my own experience and in the surveys that I did with compliance professionals, I found that there are really specific strategic things that you can do to make your career work. And instead of answering 10,000 emails, basically I thought, why not make this into a whole book that addresses this, that people can use throughout their career to figure out how to get where they're going and to have a wildly successful career in compliance.
The other thing, though, this is not just Christy giving her opinion on how to do it. You actually talked to, I'm not sure how many, but at least numerous compliance practitioners, chief compliance officers, people who've been in the profession a long time, people who've been in the profession perhaps not so long, and really incorporated a wide plethora of best practices around compliance careers into this book. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, as I started to write it, it became immediately clear to me that while I have a strong experience in private practice, in being in-house, and also on the consulting side now, I had never worked in financial services or in healthcare or in government. And so I thought, well, how do I bridge this? I can't rationally talk about this. And so what I decided to do was to survey my audience, and we had over 100 responses from people telling me, sometimes anonymously, sometimes not, what's the best thing about your area of compliance? What's the worst? What advice do you have for people getting in? And on top of that, we did what we called case studies. So people from incredible companies and with very fantastic careers wrote me about how they do training in compliance and how they do mindfulness and the future of compliance and getting into international compliance. So really, it's not just something that I think. It's an amalgamation of the ideas of the community, really speaking through the book to tell people how to do this more effectively.
So one of your opening chapters I thought was a great way to introduce the career of compliance. And it really, I would say, started with you in terms of the winding nature of the career of a compliance professional. You certainly didn't start out to be in compliance, and I didn't as well, but many of us came into compliance from either a general counsel's chair or legal department or perhaps private practice. But I wondered if you might be able to give us some of the thoughts that you have on why the winding nature of the compliance career is so important.
Well, I think it may be different in the next generation, but for the current generation of compliance professionals, nobody started out saying, gosh, I want to be a compliance officer when I grow up. It didn't exist, right? This wasn't even a career choice when I graduated from law school in 2008. The anti-bribery work was really starting to heat up, and that practice that I was in at Gibson Dunn led me to go in-house. And because of the skills of anti-bribery work and competition work and data privacy, I made sense for compliance. But the first time the recruiter said to me, maybe instead of in-house legal, you should consider compliance, I literally had to Google it. Like, what does that mean? So I think that it's winding because people didn't start out there. They started in finance or audit or legal or maybe, health compliance, like the kind of compliance with health and safety rules. But I think that the career becoming an established idea is recent, but also people don't stay in the same place. I mean, even if you stay in the title of compliance, you can go from mining and extraction over to, fast-moving consumer goods and retail, and then maybe over into banking. They're wildly different industries. And so going from one industry to another or into a vendor relationship, maybe you're developing products later on and doing sales. It is an incredibly vast field, and that's why it's exciting.
And this is one of the early chapters that spoke to me on multiple different levels, Christy. And I point to remarks by Wei Chen at the recent Compliance Week 2018 conference held in Washington when someone asked her who would she put in a compliance function now, and she named a wide variety of professional disciplines. She named IT, she named marketing, she named advertising, she named behavioral psychologists, she named behavioral scientists, she named data scientists. And that really struck me as one of the themes I got from your book is the winding nature of the compliance function. It really requires you to have disciplines or at least study a wide variety of disciplines beyond law, and something that perhaps we can talk a little bit later. But this was really the first chapter where I realized this book works on so many levels for so many different peoples, and as I said in my opening remarks, for a compliance program as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the future of compliance section, Hugh Bigwood was one of my interviewees, and he talks about how on his team he has former cops and investigators and marketing and sales people and IT people, and how he looks for a wide variety of skill sets while still making sure the person has, a very strong sense of integrity. And I think that that also widens the profession tremendously from its traditional place of being simply a legal field. And while I think that legal will always be an important and useful background, it's not the only one, and that's really important.
So you have a couple of chapters about talking about job searches, resumes, seeking jobs, accepting jobs, and then you had one specifically focused on women that I really think about a lot because I have a 21-year-old daughter, and it's entitled Asked For It. And you really had some pointers specifically for women around salary, compensation, and promotion. So I really wanted to ask you kind of what was the genesis of that chapter, and what do you advise specifically for women in the compliance profession?
Yeah, it was a little bit tricky for me to decide to include it because I'm aware of, how divisive gender politics can be. But I felt that it would be doing a disservice to not include it because the genesis is I've read so many books about, frankly, how to be a more effective women in the professional world. And there are some really important things that women don't tend to do that can significantly increase, say, the space of the wage gap to make it decreased. And one of those important things is to simply negotiate your offer. A lot of times, studies have proven over and over that women tend to accept whatever is offered instead of negotiating, which men tend to do more. And also that women don't apply for jobs until they have all of the skill set, or 95% of the skill set, where studies have shown that men will apply if they have 60% of it. And over time, that really creates significant gaps or significant missed opportunities. So I think that women becoming aware of the things they can do to make themselves increased salaries, responsibilities, and able to jump the corporate ladder more quickly, that we'll have parity, which is really, I think, what all of us want.
In another chapter, I was really intrigued with your title, and as I read through it, it certainly resonated more with me, which is, why is moving up the corporate ladder actually more like climbing a jungle gym?
Yeah, I mean, some very few organizations now are really as hierarchical as they used to be, and a lot of times, if you've got a compliance department of 2, and you're the number 2 person, the number 1 person may be there the rest of their life, basically. What do you do in order to get more skilled, in order to put yourself in a position for advancement, whether in your company or somewhere else? And a lot of times, the answer is to go sideways. So instead of climbing up the ladder, going sideways and maybe taking a stint in sales or working for internal audit, maybe doing essentially, a sabbatical on something, trying to not just see it as what's the next level, but what skills can I increase? Who can I meet in other departments? What new champions or mentors can I have that don't exclusively belong to compliance or legal, so that I can increase my reach, increase my network, increase my skill set, and through all of those things, increase my career.
And then you, in your next chapter, you talked about several topics, but it tied into something that you cited a little bit earlier on the winding career of the compliance professional. And you really make it clear that understanding numbers, being able to read a spreadsheet, knowing the difference between profit and loss, and understanding a business plan are incredibly important and critical to a compliance professional going forward. I was wondering if you could give us a few words on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like a lot of lawyers, we joke that, we got into law because we couldn't do math, right? And when I went to my first in-house meeting, I will never forget looking at the business, and someone said, well, our EBITDA this month has been improved by 3%. And everyone nodded their head and said, yes. And I went, EBITDA what? I had no idea what it meant, because private practice, I did billing, but I never had to look at the bills or the plan. And now, running my own company, everything is about that, right? Everything is about revenue, which is different than profit. And so understanding where your company is and where it's going, whether it's really paying attention to the stock price, what does the annual report say, what are the trends in our industry, what are the disruptions, what are we concerned with, which direction are we going, understanding your profit year to year, or understanding, what's happening with, are you shedding business units? Are you acquiring new businesses? Why? Then you can really support the initiatives that the company is having. And you can also anticipate, are you going to get a bigger budget or a smaller one? And what direction should you go in using it? It's really important.
And really, this is another point where I thought the book tied in really on multiple levels, because we saw in the 2017 Department of Justice evaluation of corporate compliance programs, and then again in the end of year new FCPA corporate enforcement policy, specific points, issues raised by the Department of Justice around budgeting for compliance. And if you don't understand what your company is doing from a profit and loss perspective, you're not going to be able to adequately assess your needs, both in terms of headcount and budget, and then accurately reflect that in a budgetary request. So I found that chapter really even tied to another level, which was what the Department of Justice is now telling us around budget and resources for compliance, as opposed to simply the authority of a chief compliance officer.
Yeah, I mean, in one of the sections of the book is whether you should take the job. And there are several considerations, but a huge one is budget. And it's not just financial budget, it's human resource budget, not human resources, the human resource that you or your team will have. If it's just you, is that appropriate? Is your budget big enough to give your employee population e-learning if that's the only way you're going to get to thousands of employees? You have to evaluate that, and preferably before you accept a job offer, because it really sets you up to succeed or fail. And while certainly exceptional people can work with tiny budgets, why would you want to if you could get to be someplace where they have enough resources to support the mission?
So in another chapter, you talk about raising one's profile, and you really give what I would say are some basic pointers, but they're pointers that need to be articulated. They need to be put out there. And frankly, people like you need to keep saying what those pointers are. So you want to go over them one more time?
Okay, absolutely. Yes, I'm the banging of the drum on the how to do speaking, primarily because I see so much of it that's done so badly. Basically, the major ways to raise your profile, writing and speaking are the key ones. And if you get to a certain level, doing podcasts with Tom Fox, or being able at least to start commenting on things in LinkedIn or Twitter where people see your name over and over again, the more that you can contribute to, like the compliance and ethics blog or the FCPA blog or any of the places where people will see you, Compliance and Ethics Professional Magazine, the more that you can get your name out there as an expert, and the more people see it, the more clout you will necessarily have. And it doesn't need to be a huge time-consuming effort. If you commit to writing once a year, 800 words of a blog post, you're already ahead of the game. When someone Googles your name, it doesn't just come up with your LinkedIn account or, God forbid, no account at all. It helps you to really show your expertise. And I think even more importantly, there's a story that in the book and also that, was real. It happened to me. I was helping a compliance team to hire a new hire, and they had a really strong sanctions issue that they needed to resolve. And the person we hired sent their resume with a cover letter and an article they'd published on the sanctions issue that the company was facing. I mean, talk about immediately showing expertise and making you stand out from the pack. So I think the commitment to showing up, whether it's in speaking, writing, blogging, commenting, there's so many ways to really become part of the community. Even just sharing articles you like on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, you become part of the community in a more visible way, and that can make a huge difference.
And I really can't emphasize that last point enough, that by sharing with the community, you succeed on so many different levels, on the personal level, on the compliance community level, on the benchmarking level, and indeed the entire compliance profession across every industry level. So that's really a great point. And the more we can do that, I think the stronger we all will be in our profession.
Yeah.
So your next chapter, I'm not sure this is the one you would point to bringing it all together, but Christy, for me, this was certainly one of the most important ones. And it was, to me, one of the most important. And I'm speaking of chapter 10, Collaboration is the Key, Playing Well with Others, which starts off appropriately with a quote from Captain Jack Sparrow. But it works on so many different levels because, or worked for me because it worked on so many different levels. Obviously, for the compliance professional reading this personally, you give some great pointers. But I thought really, for me, the larger point was how compliance must work with other corporate functions. And if I could take it then to what the Department of Justice says a compliance program should be doing, this is the way you operationalize your compliance program. You work with these corporate functions and you lay out some specific techniques. So I've set it up. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Chapter 10 and why you think collaboration is the key?
So I just opened the book to find so I could quote Captain Jack correctly. He says, the problem is not the problem. The problem is your attitude about the problem. And I think when compliance gets siloed or silos itself, which I've seen repeatedly, gets in turf wars, it is a disaster because you aren't a silo. You aren't by yourself. And the more you can utilize the important skills and the important things assigned to human resources, procurement, legal, with management, with human, like all of those areas, and especially internal audit, the more you can collaborate effectively with them, the more good you can do for the company. And frankly, the more support you'll have for your program, and the better we all serve as a community, the company. So what I lay out is at least 4 different ways to specifically work with each of the functions, which tend to include things like making sure that everyone agrees on what the remit is. So if you're talking about whistleblower hotline complaints that tend to deal with HR issues, that you talk to HR and say, right, good. What I'm going to do is make sure I know that every one of these has been closed, or I read the final report, or I know that it was handled properly. We have an investigation protocol that if there's a violation of the code of conduct as well as an HR issue, that I'm involved. Setting those things up before they happen, or even now if they've never been set up, can make such a big difference. Or teaching your procurement team about red flags for modern slavery so that they're equipped and that they understand antitrust, so they don't go sending different contracts or different bids from competitors to each other. There's so many things that you can do to really work effectively with the other functions, as well as with outside counsel and consultants and organizations that support the community. So I think seeing yourself as part of the greater organism of both your company and of the field can really make a big difference in how successful you are.
So in your penultimate chapter, you talk about, or at least speculate on, where compliance may be going, the future of compliance. And you had a great Q&A with Hugh Bigwood. And I was just wondering, kind of what did you take away? I'm sure you had a longer interview than you've been able to write about in the book, but what did you really take away from his thoughts around behavioral economics and how that all ties in with behavioral science and compliance?
Yeah, he was an interesting character. I had people read the book, and at least one person wrote notes all over it about how wrong he is. And it's fascinating to me because, of course, it's one person's idea, but it's a lot of people's different ideas about how it's going to go. And Hugh is really, really into nudge theory and behavioral economics, meaning that we can analyze people's decision making and try to really affect it at the point they're making that decision, or anticipate how they're going to behave based on the factors that are around them in terms of their motivations and their ability to influence a situation or make the wrong choice. And he's really into focusing on compliance as something you sell, and that is a product, and how do you manage it as if you had a sales and marketing team to get out there, get the message out there, and if it goes wrong, what he calls after-sales service, to help the customer have a better experience or to learn lessons to change the product. So it's a really interesting framing of what it is we're doing. And I think it's pretty fascinating, but it's definitely controversial.
Wow. I read that and thought this is exactly the way we need to be going. I didn't find it controversial at all. Okay. In your final chapter, you kind of put it all together for everyone and ask people to, or request people ask some pretty direct questions of themselves, make commitments to themselves, and moving forward. So what were you trying to accomplish in your final chapter?
Well, I want people not to just read the book. I hope it's a fun read and that it makes you think, but ultimately I want it to affect your career. And I can't affect your career unless you choose to do things that will change it and affect it. And the first thing, I think there's so much just going through day to day that if you don't think about where you want to go, it's so hard to get there. So whether or not it's, I want to stay at this company and move up 2 levels, I want to go into a different kind of compliance, I want to be in the vendor side, or I want to be a consultant in 5 years or 10 years, what do you need to do now to set yourself up for that? So making a commitment to write or speak or comment, whatever that's going to be, writing it down. People find that writing down your goals increases the likelihood of actually accomplishing them by an estimated 97%. So it's in the book. Write down where you want to go, what you're going to do to get there. Because the fact of the matter is those little things, writing once a year, commenting once a month, sharing once a week, those things accumulate into a huge body of experience and relationships. And that's how you get where you want to go.
Well, Christy, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but as we mentioned when the podcast opened, the book will go on sale Tuesday, June 19th. Where are you going to have it available for purchase?
Well, the easiest place is Amazon. It's available both in hard copy and on Kindle, and you can get it globally on Amazon, but you can also go into bookstores and libraries. While they don't always stock compliance books, because of its availability, it can be purchased any of those places, usually with next day delivery. So I really encourage you to go find it, and hopefully it'll make a big difference in your career.
And if someone wanted to perhaps follow up directly with you or had some questions with you, could they contact you? And if so, how would they do it?
Yeah, of course. So my blog and the place that I write about compliance is at www.compliancechristy, which is KRISTY.com. You can always email me as well, which is ChristysGH, KRISTYGH @sparkcompliance.com.
So I've been visiting today with Christy Grant-Hart, author of How to Have a Wildly Successful Career in Compliance. The book will be available on Amazon and other sites on Tuesday, June 19th. I can't really speak highly enough about both Christy and the book. And if this is something, if you're in compliance or you want to be in compliance, this is definitely a book for you. So Christy, with that, thanks very much. And I look forward to your next book.
Thanks so much, Tom. I appreciate it. Take care.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the FCPA Compliance Report. If you have listened to this podcast on iTunes, I hope you will rate our podcast. As it would help in our rankings and help get the word out about the longest running podcast in compliance. Also, if you have any questions, you can email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode. I hope you will join us again next week for another episode of the FCPA Compliance Report. The FCPA Compliance Report is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.